No, we're not going to talk about budget or strategic plans or anything like that you've seen me up here talking about. What you're going to do is watch me read because I've got a script. My own, but a script. So I want to talk a little bit first about the trip itself. 14 of us took a pilgrimage to Alabama to broaden and deepen our understanding of what happened before, during, and after the Civil Rights Movement. I think we all could say that we accomplished that, and so much more. We visited many museums and visited several churches, heard from a lot of different people, and here's just a little snapshot of some of those. In Selma, we visited the Tabernacle Baptist Church, one of the churches of 3 that facilitated the planning and the launching of the march to Montgomery, where we talked with Kurt and some others who marched for 3 years as a student in Selma. And that was sort of the priming the engine, getting ready for the big march, as it turns out. And the kids were doing it because they couldn't be arrested, although they were put in camps, some of them. But the parents would have lost their jobs if they would have been walking. So the kids did it. We also walked the bridge that we all know about, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where the trip to Montgomery started, and where a lot of the violence that created the bigness of the march, if you will, happened. In Montgomery, we visited the absolutely first-class, amazing Legacy Museum, part of 3 amazing museums of the Equal Justice Initiative started by Brian Stevenson. Being one of the best museums I've ever been in, it tells the story from the slave trade beginning to the issues that we still have today in just dramatic and emotional ways. We went then to the second museum of the 3, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is often called the Lynching Museum. And you'll see some pictures of that if you go on their website. That's really kind of telling. And it honors those that were killed in the documented lynchings. There are probably thousands of lynchings that are not documented. We visited the third museum of the Equal Justice Initiative, a new and still being constructed 6-acre Freedom Monument Sculpture Park with amazing sculptures and panels discussing the slavery era with human stories. We also visited the Mothers of Gynecology exhibit, took a tour with that organization, Civil Rights Memorial in the Southern Poverty Law Center, where we met with several of their staff members. We traveled back to Birmingham and visited the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 young girls were killed by the bomb that the KKK planted. So you can see it was a fairly intense trip. I left out some details because I'm short on time on doing this. So in the 4 days we were there, we were seeing these amazing artifacts, real embodiments of the work of so many civil rights advocates to help us understand the legacy of slavery in America. There is so much to unpack. I'll give you some of my interpretations, and you'll hear from others on this very intense trip. There have been over 6,500 documented lynchings occurring since the Civil War, and undoubtedly thousands more. Colorado has had lynchings as late as the 1900s, early 1900s, and in fact, there's a plaque to one of them in Confluence Park in Denver. The lynchings were frequently a community event with large crowds, including men, women, and children, numbering sometimes in the hundreds, even in the thousands, that made a big festival event of a lynching, essentially celebrating it. So that is really mind-shattering to me, that that could have happened here in America, but it did. The economic legacy of slavery is enormous even to this day. There was a significant slave trade into the Northeast of America, not only in the South, and major economic gain by whites in the Northeast due to the free labor of slavery And the building much of Wall Street reflects that free labor. And it was an enormous gain in wealth, not by the slaves, of course. After emancipation, many slaves became landowners. In the first part of the 20th century, however, 6 million blacks left the South, fleeing from the treatment of the Jim Crow era. They left their land behind, and their land was their wealth. And when they left their wealth behind, they left their legacy to pass on to future generations. And that is continuing today. That 6 million that largely left their wealth in the South, that passing on of wealth has not been able to be restored. And this was all because society and government did not protect them from the actions and laws of the Jim Crow era. While the museums we've visited were excellent, it's clear that more needs to be done to make this story be really told widely. How do we do that? Well, we're in conversation, and if you want to join those conversations, take advantage of it. We're going to be discussing what we can do. We need to have a similar approach to what you might see in Europe, particularly Germany and Berlin, about the Holocaust, where you can't miss being told about it. We need to have that kind of presence in America too. With so many venues to keep the whole story visible and make it so everyone truly sees and learns and deeply embodies our full history of slavery. Jean.
I know Jackie said only 4 minutes, but you might have to get the hook. First of all, we need to thank John and Linda. They put together an amazing trip. They herded cats on some days and drove this amazing van, which Jackie had a chance to do too. But they did a great job with the continuity, the tickets they bought, the reservations. It was wonderful, so thank you. I grew up in the Northeast. The issues of slavery and civil rights was just a history lesson, a couple pages, pass the test, know the years. This trip turned this lesson to flesh and blood people. I wanted to walk the Edmund Pettus Bridge. When I was halfway across the bridge, I remembered how much I hated bridges and hated heights, and the fact that the railing of the bridge was only up to here. And the sidewalk next to the traffic was only this much higher than the road. So I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And like when I saw this march on TV with Obama, it was the whole bridge and there was no traffic. So it was a little different for us. The drama of the Legacy Museum instilled the horrors and the human pain and the loss of what the slave trade did. And to follow up on what John said about lynching, I always thought that was something people did in secret in the woods. But to have it be a spectacle and a show was just heart-wrenching. And remember, in the Middle Ages, they talked about public hangings were, days for picnics. And it's just too bad we didn't leave that in the Middle Ages. In the museum with the lynching part, you're walking through this tremendous building and you start walking downhill and you start looking up at hanging. And there are all these metal sculptures engraved with the names, if they have the names, or unknown. And children were lynched for sassing or walking too close to the right white woman. And all I can think of was Billie Holiday's song about strange fruit, because there it was. I had just finished reading a book about the Ku Klux Klan activity in Middle America in the 1920s. Disturbing that Christian values of the Klan were being preached by paid ministers in churches throughout Middle America. And then I had heard about the test required to vote. If you want to see one, we all flunked. I still don't know the answers. There's 10 questions, and I don't know how many of you know how many seeds are in a watermelon. Probably depends on which watermelon. 147. I had my grandson Google it. Hoping for the future. There's so much talk about woke and obliterating this history because it makes you feel bad. And one of the tour guides was saying this, and we talked about this as a group, how the tour guides seemed to be going out of their way to make sure we didn't feel bad. And I piped up saying, I do feel bad. I don't feel responsible, but I feel bad. And unless we feel bad, nothing's going to change. And the one comic relief part for me was after we left this, we were having this lovely lunch, and we were still in Selma on day one. And it was a very mixed group of people in this lovely restaurant. And a group of people walked in, and one of them was a black woman with a T-shirt on, marked her as the sheriff. And she was armed, and all I could think of was how proud George Wallace would be.
Like everyone else on this trip, I went in large measure because I was hoping for some personal transformation by experiencing in a close and personal way some of the darkest moments of our country's history. And I found that. But we've had that. That's been explained, and I think everyone here can feel that in their heart. But I also found something else. I discovered that a pilgrimage can work you find things that are unexpected. And one of the things that I did not expect was to find hope. And I did find hope, even while contemplating the current whitewashing of our awful history. I found hope in the stories of the people who participated in this work. John has told you some of that. The fact that somebody who's almost my age can still feel proud and hopeful after having spent much of his childhood being not arrested, but picked up by police and put in camps where his parents wouldn't know where he was, and he would give limited food and water. I found hope in persistence, because we saw that everywhere we went. People are still committed to this, and they see a long road. They're not in this for a short win, which I have been in every single demonstration I've been in. I was hoping for a short win. They're in it for the long win. But I also found a lot of hope at the Mothers of Gynecology Museum, which John has told you about. The Mothers of Gynecology, it's privately conceived and owned enterprise. And I use the term an enterprise carefully because it's on a small lot in an inauspicious part of Montgomery, and there's no radical message announcing anything on the outside. You drive in the back, we parked our van, and we got out, and only when we got through the gate did we realize that the artist who conceived it, his name is Michelle Browder, has done far more than what we expected. The first thing is that there are 3 monumental sculptures, and when I say monumental, I mean you look up like this to see them, memorializing 3 slave women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, known women whose bodies were subjected to a variety of experiments by Dr. J. Marion Sims, who later became famous as the father of modern gynecology. The sculptures are absolutely magnificent. The woman is an artist. She came across this vision when she was in an art school in Berkeley, and they evoke both the dignity and the pain of slavery in ways that can't be explained just by a photograph or a site. They're technically beautiful. The woman is a welder. Now, how many women welder artists do you know? who can make something that's 15-foot tall, that is incredibly ornate, surprisingly fleshy, something made out of metal that really exudes the sense of reality of flesh, and terrifying in their portrayal of the consequences of involuntary, unanesthetized surgery. But they're also queenly. They're stoic survivors in the face of slavery and savagery. They reminded me, if anything, of the women who hold up the Acropolis, standing for centuries, really the foundation of civilization. But she also uses her art as a starting point for social action, and I think that's the message for this church. Art is typically a private thing. She has taken it out to be not only public, but has taken it into social justice mission. Also within her monument, there's a modern van, which she and her colleagues drive out to rural areas in Alabama to provide good gynecological services to women who otherwise do not have access to them. She's not content to limit herself to Montgomery. She's developing conference centers, which house people come in annually to talk about racialized experiences with the medical profession for women. Probably the most interesting part of it is she removed the plaque on J. Marion Sims's office in downtown Montgomery, placed it in her monument, and then designed this absolutely wonderful, huge, very sly re-imaging of the gynecological experiments with a white male as the subject. She has a sense of humor as well as a sense of social justice. So what I took away from this is that not only do we tell a story, we can tell a story of the past, but you can also retell the story the way she is, retelling it by taking the story out as a real story, but taking it out in new ways through art, through social action, taking it into the world. And I just want to end with something that has been very meaningful to me from Thomas Merton. The geographical pilgrimage is the symbolic acting out of an inner journey. The inner journey is the interpolation of the meanings and signs of the outer pilgrimage. One can have one without the other, but it's best to have both.
I'd love if you were one of the 14 pilgrims. Can you stand so that everybody knows? I know we don't have everybody. Liz isn't here and Grant's not here, but I think, right, we have everybody else? I think this is us. So just so that you know, if you have questions. Thank you. Be thankful. Be kind. Listen. Serve. Affirm. Be polite. These words and phrases were affirmations welded by Michelle Browder at that Mothers of Gynecology Museum. These words of affirmation. And they surrounded her artist rendition of a beautiful 1950s car. Probably one of the guys could tell us what kind it was. It was gorgeous. That was used to provide carpools for Black workers to get to and from their workplaces during the Montgomery bus boycotts. Perseverance, hope, strength, faith. These words of affirmation surrounded the National Monument to Freedom that honored the kidnapped, trafficked, enslaved, and abused Black people brought to this country against their will, and those who were bred here to keep this trafficking going. This monument, huge, wasn't even open yet. We got in for a soft opening. And it is engraved with over 100,000 chosen names of formerly enslaved people who participated in the 1870 census. And I forgot to write this down, but I think those 100,000 names represented about 4 million people who were counted in the census for the very first time
in 1870. But it was pretty striking that this monument was surrounded by words of power and affirmation. Walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where men, women, and children marched across to work for their voting rights and were brutally attacked, I couldn't help but notice the birds singing in the trees on the side of the river and hear the water rushing underneath that bridge, and it was tall, and seeing the trees on the banks with their strong limbs and green leaves. And I found myself wondering if those marchers in 1965 heard and saw these too. Birds, trees, water, witnesses that persevere and keep on keeping on, just like those marchers. And I was reminded about the endurance and resilience of nature and how person after person after person we met and talked to also persevere and endure. It became clear to me during this pilgrimage that this work for justice and freedom and dignity and equality is a calling. In our language, we would call that a calling from God. Every single person we met told us their story and shared from a very deep place within themselves. And it was evident that they felt a need to do the hard work of truth-telling and continue the work for justice. And that amidst the horrific things that they experience in the present tense as well as the past, witness and live with and through, person after person, as you've heard today, also expressed hope. What's striking to me about all those words of affirmation and the birds and the trees and the water and all the stories is that it could be easy to feel despair and hopelessness and stay there. But what we witnessed is that amidst such tragedy and injustice, there's still goodness and hope. And they emphasized, and in Dr. Vincent Harding's reading, they emphasized the need for community, to do this not as one starts, right? Rosa sat. But that we can't do anything without each other. And now I'm reflecting about our calling here in the 21st century. Near the end of our pilgrimage, you heard that we visited the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we entered a room at the end that had an electronic wall of justice that literally featured scrolling names of thousands and thousands of people, each who took the following stand, and I'm pretty positive all 14 of us signed this, right? I'm seeing lots of nodding. This is what the pledge said. I pledge to take a stand against hate, injustice, and intolerance. I will work in my daily life for justice, equality, and human rights, the ideals for which the civil rights martyrs died. It feels important that as people of faith, we feel called to sign this pledge and honor our commitment to continue working to dismantle white supremacy everywhere, here included. I was really struck that the lectionary today featured 1 John, and I find it a little ironic that the writer of that letter so long ago said, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And if you hate your brothers and sisters, you're liars if you say you love God." I find it ironic that the Bible and Christianity and words like this were used to justify what we call enslavement, all done in the name of Christianity. But the writer says, and every single person we met, that to love God means we love one another, and to love one another, we seek justice, equality, dignity, and human rights for all. To quote Maya Angelou, now that we know better, we must do better. And to quote Fannie Lou Lee Hamer again, no one is free until everyone is free. And so now you have heard from the four of us today and Nicole last week, and it's your turn to reflect. We will continue to reflect for quite some time, that I have no doubt. But we have two questions that we'll reflect upon. And one of the things that was really impressed upon us in our time in Montgomery was the importance of words and language. So people were really intentional about what words that were used back in the 19th and 20th centuries no longer are important now, and in fact are offensive. So just to be clear about language. Another example is how they have reclaimed some language and reclaimed names. So in parts of Montgomery, you might, if you've seen any pictures of Montgomery in the 1960s, it's a bustling business district, right? There are people everywhere. Downtown Montgomery and downtown Selma is nothing like that today, even downtown Birmingham. So what we learned is that those areas were intentionally destroyed. The once thriving business districts destroyed. And we might remember that those areas would have been called Black Wall Street. And then white people renamed it, and black people renamed it again, and it's now known as Commerce Street. So words and language and phrases, so very important. So as we take time now, our tradition is that you find a partner. We're going to put a couple questions up here. Pick one, because as Jean Walker pointed out as we were trying to figure out the questions, these are college courses that would take semesters to kind of unpack, but you've got 2 minutes, so don't feel like you've got to solve the world in 2 minutes. But as a beginning, find a partner and reflect about what is our calling as white allies and people of faith in a struggle that's still both very much present and the history being erased. So what's our calling as white allies? And what does loving God and loving one another look like in light of what you have learned and heard from us the last 2 weeks? So we'll take a couple minutes and I'll bring us back together shortly. Find a partner. And if you're on the live stream watching the recording because we know it's not working, find a partner or journal. All right, inviting you to come back from this very lively conversation. Thank you. We have a couple people who want to share. I'm really aware of the time. But are there any ideas? What did you come up with? Anybody who would like to share from their conversation? Yeah, Beth.
Yeah, I didn't speak hierarchy, but I'll say it here as calling is to have communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's really been my calling, is to open up this and keep the world going.
Yeah.
I mean, the undercurrent right now is, oh my gosh, let's get to around, let's come into our education system and our curriculum. So that was my last few years coming out of COVID, is to say, let's continue with these conversations. And not just with white people, but talk with black people. Mm-hmm. And, kind of put yourself out there and have discussions with people. And it's hard and it's difficult, but it's important.
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't hear that, Beth talked about the importance of communication, to keep talking, to keep staying woke and learning and passing on the knowledge. One of the things we talked about in the 9 o'clock this morning was we learned that pretty much anybody can put up a historical marker. Whether it's accurate or not is a different story. So what would it be like for this church to purchase some historic markers and place them in areas in Colorado where lynchings occurred, telling the story of what happened? So, yeah. David.
I went on the trip. It was wonderful and horrible at the same time. My experience currently, in the last week, I was part of a religious group that was a conservative group, and 4 times we used the word woke, not as a compliment,
Mm,
but as something of derision.
right.
And so it's to stay in those groups
Yeah.
and to stay the dialogue so
Hmm.
that we as a culture globally can, even when it's not comfortable, to continue having that conversation.
Yes.
And those opportunities are in Golden too.
Hmm.
And those opportunities are around the world. And thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah. So if you didn't hear that, David talked about the importance of being involved in the conversation in all the places, even with people who disagree. So thank you. One more, Sarah.
I'd like to, mentioning, putting up historical markers of lynching, but I think that would be good for informing people, and then also, just trying to focus on the positive things. I mean, I pulled up the list of states that have abolished the death penalty. I mean, there are good things happening. Colorado did it in 2020.
Yep.
And our state has a lot of progressive things happening. So, I don't want to wallow in the horror. I do, and my heart is, tight right now from hearing all that, even though I had already known all those things. But, let's keep on the good things that are happening and celebrate them.
That's right. Keep working towards the ways, the positive to create opportunities for justice and equality for all, 100%.
And what Brian Stevenson is doing.
Yes. That's right. Yep. Yeah, there are so many things that we can and can't do. Okay, Spence.
There might be an opportunity for us to continue this search for justice more locally through Sand Creek.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yes.
Different types of
yeah. Well, that's the intersectionality that Nicole was talking about in the Story for All Ages. Absolutely. So if you didn't hear what Spence said, he talked about perhaps this is another opportunity would be for us to join efforts with Right Relationship Boulder and the efforts around making things right with the Arapaho people. So excellent. Thank you all so very much. And we'll take a couple minutes to kind of digest and slow down and listen to the bird song. And you might even be able to hear the thunder of the flowing creek. But let's take a moment to reflect and be quiet.
Greetings to you wherever you are watching this. For those of you whom I have yet to meet in person, I'm Reverend Nicola Marsh, pastor here at Community UCC. And we see that people like you are watching our live stream each week. And because of this, we are excited to be embarking upon an experiment. And we need you. If you are engaging with us regularly, finding meaning in what we are about, we would like to extend a special invitation for you to be among the first CUCC digital disciples. For signing up for just $10 a month, you will receive a t-shirt with the new CUCC logo. And we are also exploring the idea of offering other content to those of you who are part of this new and growing area of digital ministry. Sign up to support us in this new way at cuccboulder.org/support by clicking on the yellow donate tab and noting you are a digital disciple in the instructions. Or as always, we welcome an old-fashioned check mailed to us at CUCC, P.O. Box 3646, Boulder, Colorado 80307. Thank you for being and building beloved community with us, and thank you for your gift, whatever it might be.